Hi, we're back here at Nar Shalom in the Chabura, and we have turned to the Shulchan Aruch Arizal, which is called Shulchan Ariel, and we are going to spend some time with this a few days because I have a feeling it's going to take time. But this is really an introduction to Pesach. Yesterday we learned some basic halachot of Pesach. There's endless halachot of Pesach. We each have to do the best we can. But we're going to begin. The Rav begins Be'inyan Pesach v'Yetziat Mitzrayim Hinei Noda. The subject of Pesach and the leaving of Egypt of the Jewish people. It's a known thing. What the rabbi said. Ki otam adorot harishonot dor enosh v'dor haflaga silkut shechina lamala mibergia shivi'i. Right, that these early generations, it is known, the generation of Enosh, the generation of the flood, we were just, not the flood, excuse me, the plaga, the generation of Nimrod and the building of the Tower of Babylon. They caused the Shekhinah to leave the world 7 levels. So that's not really a good record. That's not a good track record to cause the divine presence to leave the world. But that's what happens. We have to kind of relate to the divine presence as this power that comes down to us, and it leaves us, and it comes down, and it leaves us depending on who we are, what we're doing, and our good deeds. Okay? So the Rav tells us this, and then he goes on, Mechamat avanotam, because of their sins, the Shekhinah left. Okay? Veda, ki Yisrael shayu b'ota ador shel ibud Mitzrayim. Now the generation of the enslavement in Egypt, of course, where the Jews were, they were actually within the nation, there were sparks of seed, of light power from the original man Adam. That Adam himself had a time where he was separated from his wife for 130 years. Now remember, Adam was supposed to live 1,000 years. And we know that the rabbis teach us that he gave 70 of his years to King David to live, and because he saw in the future that there needed to be this king, and he had a special job to do, so Adam donated 70 years. So he only lived to be 930, It was a shorter trip. But we have to understand something very deep here, and something that we could talk about a lot. But the Maharal writes that measuring time, was different in the period of the ancients, where it says that one man lived 930 years, another one 960 years, and these people lived to extreme old age. The Maharal writes that time itself is different, and therefore the clock could have been moving faster than we understand, because the whole planet changed after the flood. We know that the planet before the flood, the Midrash tells us, was one climate. And it wasn't spinning on an axis, it was flat, so it had equal exposure to the sun, north and southern hemispheres. Only when the axis was shifted by the flood did the concepts of winter and summer, spring and fall become apparent in the weather patterns of the world. So the whole earth changed at the flood, meaning the time changed as well. And it could be the ancient clock, if we had an old Timex, back in the day, that Adam's 930 years went a lot faster than we perceive the passing of a year. And if you look at it, it's very interesting. We have about 1/10 the lifespan that Adam was given. So you think of it, one way to think of it is that, well, Adam had a battery pack that lasted a lot longer than ours. Right? That we had a battery 1/10 as powerful as Adam's battery. And that battery, of course, is the neshama. And the closer we go to the source, the more powerful the neshama is. And this is true all across the board for Jews and non-Jews throughout the Tanakh. As we progress forward in time, souls live shorter and they accomplish less. Okay, regardless, the Rav is telling us, though, that the 130 years that Adam was separated from Eve, there were souls that were brought down, and he's going to explain more. And these sparks that came out of Adam showed, see, Adam HaRishon ba'otam kal shanim, for those 130 years, these sparks that came out, ad shelo nolad shet, until he reunited with Chava and he gave birth to Shet. Shet was Adam's third son, and when he reunited with Chava, so then there were no more sparks lost because there was a place to go for those sparks. Remember, a man's vital power needs a feminine aspect to reach fruition in this world. Okay. And afterwards, these sparks that were first came from Adam, and then they went onward and reincarnated into the generation of the flood, the generation of Noah and the ark, etc. And we know that even in that generation, they were still having a problem with this appropriate use of the vital life force that we call seed. And it was inappropriate used and it was destroyed, and therefore they did not complete the tikkun of Adam. And ke'ena shoresh asher misham notzru v'hutzavu ad shenimuchu. Right? And they were like their root. That these souls, at the time of the flood, well, we know what was going on at the time of the flood. Everything was sleeping with everybody. So it wasn't a very nice time. And this is called the destruction of the seed. And this was an expression of the original problem that Adam had because he didn't have a wife for 130 years. But the Zohar teaches us that he also had the problem of not having a wife. And what do you do with the natural urges of the body when you don't have a wife? It's not an easy thing. It's a very difficult thing. But this tikkun was coming back generation after generation, from Adam to the flood, and then guess what? It's going to keep going forward, reincarnating generation after generation. It says God saw that man's evil was very great upon the land. Right? What is this evil? This evil of bringing down souls that don't have a female counterpart to create oneness. Right? These are souls without bodies. Essentially, that's what happens. This idea of seed without a receptacle is called evil. And someone who does this is called evil. And of course, the most literal, direct reference to this teaching is the tribe Yehuda, the leader Yehuda, the son of Jacob. His two sons, Er and Onan, committed this act of not completing their union with their wives properly because they didn't want their wives to get pregnant, because they wanted their wives to stay skinny. You hear this? Literally, this is what the Midrash is teaching us, that the people, and this is the same thing we're taught about Lemech. Lemech was one of the early people mentioned in the succession of generations. And Lemech also had two wives, and Rashi tells us one he kept for having children and one he kept for beauty. And the one that he kept for beauty, he didn't want her to get pregnant. So this is also wrong. We are not allowed to monkey around with this substance and play around as if, my wife, I don't want her to get pregnant because I don't want her to get to gain weight. That's an absurd thing. But they were doing it. And even to the level of the two sons of Yehuda, who was a huge tzaddik, they had this problem. So you see, it keeps coming back. For tikkun, the same idea. Okay. Kativ oil Rasha Ra, Pasuk says, woe to the Rasha, his Ra. And we know that the main punishment of doing evil is the evil itself. That evil becomes expressed in our lives in a way that it becomes a punishment. Ukativ lo yagor hara, that there should not be dwelling with you evil. We know that part of the Jewish experience, we had a debate about this on Purim, about the separation of Jews from other nations. And a lot of people are very insulted by this idea that Jews want to be separate. But and I answered them, well, you don't want to be separate? You bought a house in order to be separate, so you don't live on the road. You wear clothes so you could be separate. You go to pray where you want to pray. You do a lot of things that are separate and different. So the Jews come along and say, well, I don't want to eat that food, and I don't want to go to that club, and I don't want to mix with those people. And suddenly the world is insulted. But the world's doing the same thing too, making separations. The difference is that we're trying to make separations because what we're taught is holy and what isn't. And not as opposed to, the language I speak or my college degree or where my parents made their millions. That's the type of separation that's not really a true separation. So it's very important to remember these ideas because we are challenged all the time. By being Jewish means that you're in a place of being challenged. The Baal Shem Tov says that the reason we eat salmon on Shabbos is because the salmon is a fish that swims upstream and against the current. And so too the Jews are always swimming against the current, whether we like it or not. But when we understand why, and we can explain why, then the rest of the world's going to accept, I think, and understand a little better why we do maintain so many distinctions and separations. Because we don't want to live with evil. What's that, Mordechai?
It tastes good.
Salmon also tastes good. Well, with a little béarnaise sauce, a little lemon. Because we find that generation, they really, the generation of the flood was considered the worst of all time. And then we go on, and Adam HaRishon, of course, was producing those souls. And God said, I will erase the man I created. Adam HaRishon atzmo, that Adam was even under a ban, that God was going to destroy him for his part in this whole multi-generational repair of the sparks of seed that left him. That even Hashem was going to destroy Adam, and Hashem created him directly, not through a man and a woman, like the rest of the generations are created. And Hashem was even going to destroy those sparks and those seeds. So you see that Adam really had a problem, and there's even a Gemara that says that Adam himself asks you not to talk about this because it's considered embarrassing. But who did Adam have for a teacher? How did Adam know? How would Adam respond after what happened in the garden? It was a pretty shocking experience. To be kicked out of to be cursed, to be kicked out of your home, to be divorced from your wife temporarily, and to suffer having to go to work and dig the land. And a lot of things happened. It was very traumatic for Adam. But Hashem was going to raise him to start over. Of course, he didn't. Why? Because of his mercy, because he looked into the future and he saw many tzaddikim were going to come out of Adam. And when Hashem saw the tzaddikim in the future being born later in time in the repair of humanity, it was worth it to create Adam because the tzaddikim would come after to fix. And really, this is part of the secret of the Jewish people, that we are here to fix those souls that were born without bodies. All right, and that's a big responsibility. That's a large contract to sign. That's really why the Jewish people are here, to fix those initial mistakes that began in humanity, and of course we're still dealing with it today, unfortunately. Okay, now, and afterwards, these souls still returned again. Nitgalgalu b'dor haflaga. They were reincarnated into the generation of the dispersion, the generation of Nimrod in the Tower of Babel. These souls had to come back and get fixed again because they messed up at the generation of the flood. Now there are interpreters that say that the reason that they built the tower was they were afraid of another flood, and they wanted someplace high they could escape to. So, it's kind of logical in a way that you would think to do so, but it's still called a war on God, that they warred on God. In other words, they warred on the idea that God controls us. That's humanity's biggest problem. I don't like the idea of being told what to do. I don't like having a boss. I don't like having a king over my head. And God is saying, wait a minute, I'm a good king. I'm a patient king. I'm a loving king. You're going to like having me as king. But the people weren't so convinced in the beginning, for sure. And in the end, what happens is they rebel, and they built the tower, and they're warring with God. And of course, they're going to have to be dispersed, and they're going to have to die, and they're going to come back again. Let's see what happens. So it says, "Va'alehem kativ." It says, "V'yarad Hashem l'r'ot et ha'ir." God came down to see the city of Nimrod, which is where the Tower of Babel was built. V'et ha'migdal, and the tower asher banu b'nei Adam, that the people had built this tower. It was a massive thing. This was no small little, the Washington Monument is like nothing compared to this, right? This little spire in the sky. The Tower of Babel they say it took one man a year to climb with his brick to the top. In other words, it was so big it took a year of walking up the tower to get to the top to put the brick down. So go figure what kind of employment issues they had over there. It sounds too much, John? You don't believe it, John? Oh, John, how could you say that? Well, the Midrash is constantly, it's important we should know that the Midrash is always challenging our belief system, right? It's challenging us, and some people say, no, it's literal and it's true, and other people say, no, it's figurative and it's symbolic, and I say that both are true. And that's what I've been taught. But nonetheless, regardless, they built the tower, they warred with God, and they had, of course, they were an extraction of the first man. No, we have reached Kaddish, unfortunately. We're going to continue with this understanding of the Tikkun Olam and the Tikkun of the world and the Jewish people in Pesach tomorrow. So it's good to see all of you. I hope you all had a great Purim, and we'll talk tomorrow morning, God willing, 11:45 live at Nar Shalom. Take care.